Very warm welcome, Pirojsha. Great to have you on this chat about the future of India. Always exciting, that's the subject. And, seeing what all you have done in the last decade, I think, for you and your group, and especially in the entire area of sustainability and urban areas and, with Godrej Properties and the other companies that you chair, very exciting times indeed for India. But our whole focus of this conversation, Pirojsha, is to see what can we do collectively and collaboratively, government, corporate India, civil society, to accelerate that pace of change, maybe by a little bit. What are some of those innovative ideas? What are some of the things that we can do better? Where is the opportunity for us to see that, or when you wake up on 15th August 2047, what's that India you would like to see? And what will that journey be like, right? So these are the kind of topics we would like to cover in today's conversation. So firstly, thanks for joining in, and maybe to to get us started. I was just thinking about it as I saw you, with your cool, calm, serene personality. Let me start. Do you? I'm sure you see dreams, right? But if you woke up, 15th August 2047, right, and you looked around, what would you see different about the landscape of India, or how would you like to see it?
Yeah. Well, Rajan, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Greatly looking forward to this discussion and really love this framing, right? I think 100th birth anniversary of the country is, of course, a milestone that we should all look forward to with excitement. And I think it should, also set us up as a real set that up as a real vision for what we have hoped to achieve. Because I think obviously we've come from a past with some challenges, with colonialism, etc. But now setting our own independent path over this next 100 years, I think there are exciting opportunities. And 2047 to me is just far enough away that we can change almost anything that we want to that by then, but not so far away that there's no accountability and you're just totally looking at things as pie in the sky. So I think some of the things I'd certainly hope for the country by that date is one, that we are closer to becoming a developed nation, that you see poverty more or less eliminated from Indian society, that you see illiteracy, lack of access to opportunities as far as eliminated as we can possibly get to. And I think those two, to me, are probably very, very important and fundamental goals. But I think that the challenge, and perhaps what we'll talk a little bit about today, is how do you achieve those goals of development and poverty eradication and opportunity creation while not also degrading the physical environment we've inherited. We're not doing a great job of keeping that balance today, as is often evidenced in Indian cities. So I think getting the whole, and you often have in India the camp who kind of just want development at any cost or environmental protection at any cost. And I think the real music will be made when we figure out how to keep these two things that are intention sometimes, how we keep them in balance and how we make sure that they actually enable each other over time. So I think there are lots of things we can do differently from what is currently being done. But I think those are my big hopes for 2047. That we're a developed country, that we're a country with everyone having education and opportunity, and we're also one where we've made progress on environmental issues rather than let them worsen from here.
No, I think, great vision and very encompassing of, what the potential of a youthful country should be, and you rightly started out saying that it's far enough and yet not so far. So I think it's the best way to look at it is a marathon with 400-meter sprints.
Right.
So I think it's a good segue to, how we should frame this conversation. While we can imagine what we should be in 2047, if we were to take, say, a 3-year time frame, right? I mean, there are some urgent priorities towards enabling what you just talked about, right? In all of those three areas, if you want to talk about, or you want to specifically talk about the environment and sustainability, totally up to you. But what are those few things that are urgently, or we can address in our real short term, because when you see some small success, Pirojsha, we all know it, just strengthens, builds foundation, and, takes it further. And, today in all of these areas, I think there's a tremendous amount of trust building that is needed, or trust that is required between particularly government, industry, and civil society. I think there is an element of, so while, we will talk about specifics, I think we should also think about that fabric of India, that will
Right.
enable this thing to happen, right? Because ultimate outcomes is what will, count. So in both of these kind of areas, if we were to look from a short term, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, on urban management, I think one of the ideas I think that is already well overdue when it should be implemented is kind of responsive a government that is accountable at the city level. So I think we're one of the few large countries in the world, to my understanding, that doesn't have empowered city level elected management. And most of the management of cities is by departments that are part of the state government. When you have a country like India that's still, two-thirds, one-third rural, urban, I think for our urban areas to see the kind of development they need, that is able to balance environmental issues with attracting growth. One of the first, and to me, one of the really low-hanging fruits is making sure you have accountable city-level governments, which are elected by the public and are accountable, therefore, to the people they are governing. So I think you're seeing some small experiments with it. Bangalore, in a few months ago, has brought about a new management system to try and get a holistic city level accountability. But I think we need some national level thought to this. And I think without this, you'll always have this slightly, I think one step forward, two steps back kind of approach to city level management. The other thing I think, India's seen a lot of opportunity with is that our development is happening at a period of very dramatic and rapid technological advancement, whether you look at phone connectivity and the level of change that has brought to India over the last 10, 20 years. The likely opportunities that things like AI will bring over the next 10, 20 years to overcome some of our capacity constraints. Because I think, we are a very big country, 1.4 billion people. Obviously, getting good governance, getting the best systems down to the last mile is a very big challenge in the country. And I think some of these technological areas of development give us an opportunity to really leapfrog in things like education. And those education to me is probably, the number one priority we need to have as a country. It's something we need to think very deeply about. Are we creating the right level of talent and opportunity for people? And how do we use technology to drastically scale that?
So, I think both structural and what you say, technology-led systemic change seem to be two very strong levers, right, for us to be able to get there. On the structural part, like what you said, if you're looking at an empowered city, and I'm sure there are global best practices that you've come across. That requires a shift in our political system also in the way what you rightly said, empower. Are there some good, global models that have worked that you think would be relevant for a country like India?
Yeah, definitely. So I think if you look at, any world-class global city, to my understanding, take New York as an example, would have an elected mayor. There's quite Zoran Mamdani now is facing election and likely to become the new mayor in New York. But the point is the citizens of the city of New York will choose that mayor. There will be a subsequent election for the position of mayor. They will be voted in or out basis their platform for city level governance. Here, I think too much is happening. Either you have the Lok Sabha elections for the national government or the state level elections. And the problem is, how do you create accountability for the city? I think politicians actually do have the best interests for the most part of the public in mind. But if you are asking a politician who is, say, the chief minister of a state, where two-thirds of the citizens are residents of more rural areas, to focus on the city, you're almost asking them to do something that is not in the key focus of a majority of their constituents. So I think India's economic growth, India's movement on this in all of these directions is going to depend a lot on its urban development management. And I think for that to happen, you need accountable city level managers. And I think actually, Rajan, we're one of the few countries that doesn't have this. So
Mm.
the examples are plentiful. I think, my understanding, almost every major global city would have an empowered city level management structure that is, democratically accountable to the residents of that city.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair point you make, because while we will have municipal corporations and all of that, they all operate, as some division of a chief minister. So at least for maybe three of the top urban cities in every state, can we create a mini chief minister kind of a role for that city, right? Where they are typically focused on the growth and development. I think a great thought where, somebody also comes, it requires, of course, a lot more discussion, debate, to see how this could be, a valuable and productive way of bringing about change. But great point there, Pirojsha. And to your second point, which was on technology and education, and particularly its use there. The world is changing at a crazy pace, right? And even education, as we've seen it, earlier, and education today, and what will it be tomorrow? Particularly if we look at it from in light of livelihoods. Nobody wants, a job for a lifetime today, or a career for a lifetime, and it will keep switching. So the dynamism of education also needs to change. One is, of course, base level education, but then putting the learner at the center, using technology to personalize around their strengths and passions, and actually preparing them to be, employable, is also a big shift, right? So again, in those areas, anything in particular that you would like to see, recommend, to kind of make this shift happen?
I think there's huge opportunities here, Rajan. I think again, on the technology side, I think getting these technologies into the school levels at the ground level can help in a huge way, because one of the key capacity constraints is, of course, qualified teachers, teacher attendance. So can we put children's education more into their own hands, more into the hands of their parents, give them, through AI and things now we've all
Yeah.
been using, you can get any piece of information at the, tap of a few buttons. So how do we leverage these tools, and get the kids across the country the information they have? Particularly, I think one of the things that, that is potentially hugely disappointing in a country like India is, think of the kind of talent you see across the country. As soon as the opportunities are created, I mean, I think some of us were probably watching this cricket match last night. You see, young kids coming in, playing brilliantly well. As soon as things like IPL, the academies that we've created across the country have given those sets of opportunities, you're seeing that talent flourish and blossom. How many super talented Indians are we not letting, shine to their full potential because we're not able to see their talent, not able to, give them the required opportunities? So I'd say, to me, that first level is actually the most important. That we certainly need to talk about much more advanced skilling and jobs, and what are the best jobs, and how are we going to, contribute to more dramatic economic progress for the country. But to me, I think the starting point has to be, how do you literally get illiteracy to pretty close to zero? How do you make sure that every kid has the basic fundamentals? And then you're able to see who the best are and give them all the opportunities again. So one of the things our foundation is working on now is, how do you get together programs which can take the highest talented, underprivileged children and give them the best of opportunities, whether they're IITs, IIMs, or even global institutions. But to do that, I think we need to, and I think only the state can get this fundamental base layer of primary education fixed to a degree where, every Indian can at least get to that level where they can aspire then for higher things.
Yeah, I think a lot of work is happening, and we see great work happening in, pockets of
True.
excellence. I think one of the objectives of the India at 100 Foundation is also to align, what the government spends, along with what, corporate CSR and philanthropic foundations of corporate groups and others are spending, around these outcomes. But the quality of investment will be different, right? So with corporate CSR, we're saying, can we invest in systemic change, talent systems, IT systems, community systems, right? That make the government spending more meaningful, right? Probably the same buck goes that much further, right? I think that is a collaboration, right? When we talk
Yeah.
of a societal change. But typically what happens is even foundations and corporate CSR looks directly at the impact that is created out of their dollar, right? And we're trying to figure this out and how to, mobilize more collaboration amongst stakeholders to make that happen. Uh, through
I
your
think that's a
foundation, do you see something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think, one of the major sort of goals of the foundation we've established is let's try to be catalytic in the sense that, so one of, for example, just as one illustration, there's several of these. There's a recently created organization called the Institute for Sustainability, Employment and Growth, started by an ex-McKinsey partner with the support of, us and several other partners. And their goal is to, aid governments that are interested in bringing about policy reforms that are aligned with sustainable growth, aid them in identifying what those policies should be, and then actually partner them and provide subject level expertise in bringing those policies alive. So, for example, they've now partnered with the Maharashtra government on an energy policy, on a city master plan policy, where they are engaging directly with the leadership at the state government, both on the political side and the bureaucratic side, to help, exactly what you said, make sure that the private sector and public sector are working closely together, that if there are best practices in the private sector, including global best practices, that these can be shared, and that, I think the government wants to do a lot, but it's again a big country, and we all know a very challenging one to manage. So I think a little bit of assistance in terms of how to bring these ideas, what should these ideas be at the ground level, and then how to actually implement them. We think can go a long way and have, for every rupee we invest into something like this, we think the outcome can be order of magnitude higher because of the impact it can have if implemented successfully.
Yeah, no, I think, and therefore the scope of innovation within, the way we deploy, cap funds to make this change happen, that itself is an innovation framework, right? Right from a policy to who does what and what could be some outcomes that, could be achieved. And you're right, there is so much opportunity here if we can figure out how technology can make this collaboration, stronger. So this one example that you gave, I'm sure every foundation or corporate CSR has these same examples, but we
Right.
are still not consolidating that for what you rightly said. If we want no Indian to be illiterate, and we want everyone accessible, say, to affordable healthcare, the fundamental goals of a developed country, I think we have to view this as a very serious commitment, right? From every stakeholder, and I think that's what we are seeking to bring together, because all of these ideas and thoughts can go to a group, and maybe five or three foundations working together to take up one project could be a good starting point before others can.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say there is some of this collaboration happening. So, I think within foundations, we're working, for example, with some other foundations on their ideas along a
Yeah.
similar nature. So some of that is happening, but is there an opportunity to, put this on a faster track? Absolutely. And I think we should all be quite impatient about it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a big idea emerging, around some of these discussions, that how do we really, make that platform, right, that everyone's committed to really fast track, some of these, initiatives that you mentioned. But, moving now a little bit, Pirojsha, to you personally, I know that, you have a sustainability, and these are, things that are very personal to you. I think, over the years, I don't know whether it's a family generational thing, that has come down, and I know you mentioned that also in the first, your opening comment about the environment and, things like that. And, it's so nice to see so many new technologies happening there as well, right? I mean, we were just building something, and there's a 100-year-old tree that could have been transplanted beautifully and continue to live just in a different location. So technology today is enabling, and creating the space for everything to coexist. And many such new initiatives are happening. Tell us a little bit about your personal compassion there, and some of the things that you are you would like to see happen over, at least, even if we talk over the next, again, 3 to 5 years? What are some of the key things in that space you would like to see?
Yeah. So Rajan, I think the passion comes from a few places. I think one, as you pointed out, I've actually been very blessed and proud to inherit a legacy where environmental stewardship and focus has been something the family and the group and foundations have been working on for before I was born. So I think and before environmental issues became as sort of critical and urgent as they are today. So I think I have been fortunate to inherit some of that interest. In addition to that, I think I view climate change as certainly the defining kind of challenge of our generation. I'm actually quite optimistic that we will, with human ingenuity and creativity, solve it. But only because we have to take it seriously, get all the kind of research and investment into ideas to solve it. But I remain optimistic about it, but certainly see it as the defining challenge of our generation, and therefore, of course, something I would like to have a positive impact on. And then, the first business in the group that I became involved with and kind of grew up in was our real estate development business. And as you probably know, the energy consumption intensity in the built environment is one of the key contributors to climate change. And there are both very technologically advanced things that one can do, in real estate development to mitigate this, but also some pretty straightforward, simple things like, how do you orient buildings? I mean, look at Indian architecture, beautiful ways of passive cooling of buildings, many other ideas that we've lost somewhere along the way. But simple things like how do you orient the buildings with regard to the sun? What kind of shading do you provide to prevent direct heat on the glass? What kind of water fixtures do you provide, and so on, can actually make a huge difference. So I think that combination of this is a legacy of the group that I'm incredibly proud of and something I want to build on, that it seems like the challenge of our lifetime, and that I happen to be working in a space where the opportunity for impact was large, I think, combined to make this a big priority. And I'm happy that we have been able to do many things over the years. My uncle and others, my grandfather and others have ensured the mangroves in Vikhroli, where we operate our business out of, are one of the best maintained and largest privately held mangroves near the center of Mumbai city. In the early 2000s, there's the CII, along with Godrej, built the CII Godrej Green Building Center, which at the time was the highest LEED Platinum rated building in the world. Godrej Properties has been recognized on GRESB, which is a global list of sustainable development, as the #1 developer in the world for 3 consecutive years. So happy to see these proof points of that focus coming out. But certainly, I think we all feel the impact of environmental degradation quite obviously. I think particularly in the last decade or so. If you look at cities like Delhi and Mumbai and the kind of air quality we suffer through, particularly during the winter months, it's something that I think we should take very seriously. I think when you see data suggesting we're all knocking off several years of our own lives, our children's lives, it's something we need to take quite seriously. Similarly, when we look at the kind of pollution in the seas or lakes and rivers and so on, these are all things that I think are possible to rectify. Well, the good news is, if you look at every city in the world that's faced such problems, whether LA in the 1980s, Bangkok in the 90s and 2000s, Beijing in the last decade, they've all taken stock of the challenge. The citizens of those communities have decided it's not something they're willing to live with. The politicians have had to take action, and all of those have successfully been resolved. So I think, again, I remain extremely optimistic and not at all fatalistic about where this is all going. But it is something that will only change once I think we as the citizens kind of put it on the agenda as a serious item as I strongly think we should. So I think the dream would, on the environmental side, be to live in cities where you can feel proud of the quality of the air, you can go for a swim in any of the water bodies around you, and so forth.
No, and I think, beautifully put that the responsibility for that is in the hands also of the individuals who are going to, benefit. So I think it's a collaborative thing because, even one of the things we've been contemplating and I think we've been building towards, even as the India at 100 Foundation, is the role of the individual in society, what we talk of ISR or individual social responsibility. And how does that go hand in hand with CSR? And one of the key elements that comes out in ISR, Pirojsha, and is very clear. And whenever we go out to, especially young people, and say, "What can you do for your country?" Right? In 1940, in the 40s, if you had to say, "What could you best do for your country?" I can give my life. Right? Today, you don't need to give your life. Right? What you can do for your country is, of course, you can take a teaching tool and go out into the villages. What you said, educate someone and help them, and there's a lot of material there. You can do many things which are more pro bono volunteering types, but one big area is your personal consumption, the way whether you put your lights off when you do your shower, simple things. And what we've been trying to build is an ISR score, and then recognize those who you know achieve a particular score. And it makes sense also because today companies and products that want to serve this community, you will be able to identify. So one can actually create a win-win in society because there are brands who want to serve those consumers, and there are consumers who will stand out, right? So this is one idea that we've been discussing and trying to see whether that is scalable. Would love to get your thoughts on some flavors that can be added there, particularly since you brought out the role of the individual, because if you're the beneficiary and you're going to enjoy that and your next generation, uh,
Yeah.
anything that comes to mind, maybe through some of your other experiences that individuals can do to shape this.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that makes me very optimistic, you speak to any younger person about this, I think the level of seriousness they take it with and the level of kind of personal drive and accountability tends to be much higher than people of our age or older, which is I think wonderful to see and hopefully is indicative of where the world will move on these issues. I think counterintuitively, I think one of the things that will be required to get this mindset is also some level of economic development and improved education. On the one hand, development, of course, has its own burdens on the environment and own requirements. But it also, I think, is hard to ask people to care about polluted air if they can't make two ends meet, if they have more pressing concerns. I think in some ways being worried overly about the quality of the air you breathe and what it may or may not be doing to your health, typically 30, 40 years from now, is a bit of a luxury. So I think one of the things we need to focus on is making sure that we understand that we have to keep all of these things moving together, which is why I think sometimes, as important as I think environmental conservation and stewardship is, I think sometimes people who are, go take that down the route of kind of almost anti-development
Mm.
have got it wrong, because I don't think that will ever work. I think you need to find ways for these things to move hand in hand. So I think educating people about the importance, but also resolving other concerns along the way is probably the way this gains import over time. But already, I think if you hear the conversations in places like Delhi and Mumbai about things like air pollution, they're very different than they were maybe even 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm. No, and I think what is important, like you rightly said, is development is required for a country like India, and
Mhm.
therefore the right prioritization and the extent to which one can take that is also critical. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because we have multiple Indias, right? I mean, we have, like, someone will say, four Indias, basis different economic incomes, and whenever there is a shift, there are a few hundred million people that will move from one level to the other, creating tremendous opportunity for business development stakeholders. But when we prioritize, and I want to come to this, talking more about some good ideas for the country. We still go to a state, and one particular state will be super efficient, lay out the red carpet. One other state will do something different. And today, India has become, led by this federal structure, different states, and you operate, I'm sure your business in, across the country. Uh, what can enable that? Is it a better if a state outlines its top three priorities, right? And you feel yes, you can serve in those markets. What can we do better as a country, to enhance to ensure that we are able to prioritize this? Because India is going to need many things, right? But there will
Yeah.
be some states that might want to prioritize A over B. Any thoughts and suggestions around that, or your experiences from working in different states?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say overall, I first joined the business in 2004, so it's been a little over a couple decades now of working in India. I'd say the overall trend of state level governance, I think, has improved very meaningfully, in my view, over that period. Today, if you meet, the number of chief ministers coming to Mumbai to seek investment, to really focus on a pro-growth agenda and competing, I think, in a very good way for investments with each other, is something that's been actually quite exciting for me to see and gives me a lot of confidence in the growth trajectory of the country being something that is quite sustainable. So I actually think that is working well. As a country, I think we again just need to get this balance of economic policy being pro-growth, along with giving people what they need in the short term, get that balance right. Just like we said, rapid economic development and environmental issues can sometimes be in tension. So can rapid economic development and short-term financial requirements of underprivileged citizens. And I think if you try to rebalance in a way that doesn't keep that tension at the appropriate level, it probably won't work. So I think just getting that balance right, but making sure that we are constantly looking at reforms, that we are constantly like looking at things like we've had just now, some GST rationalization. I think steps like this are win-win. They're putting money in customers' hands, which is good both for them as well as for the economy as a whole. But can we look at more structural reforms? Again, it's difficult. There are many stakeholders. It's a big country,
Yeah.
big stakes. We've seen with things like the agricultural reforms, how challenging some of these can be. But I think we need to keep trying, need to get things like, like in our real estate business, we see the headaches, for example, from land reforms not being in place and kind of land titles being a, ongoing nightmare sometimes to figure out. So things like this will need kind of a sustained approach. I think India is doing a lot of things right? You don't grow for 2 decades at 7 odd % without that. But I think we need to keep at it. We're at this period between now and our 100th birthday is a very critical period because it is obviously one where India's population growth is now slowing. We are growing older. So I think making the most of this period of demographic boon, which is almost exactly the period up to 2047, is going to be critically important. And I think the government needs to get that balance right of focusing on development, but also investing very significantly into things like education and healthcare.
No, and sometimes, the triggers for some things like this just come from the, external world, right? Like today we are faced with with a global challenge, where one has to figure out more investment and growth domestically, assuming if it's getting harder to export into countries like the US and others. So sometimes you get a trigger moment, right? Like there was 1992 was one such moment, and when we took that up, so many feel this is that moment when India should really deep dive and make these structural reforms, like whether it's land, labor, which have been there for very long, to be able to unlock much greater accelerated value in India. But looking at the global scenario for a little bit, and I'm of course every business is affected. today you can't separate geopolitics and economics in any way, from so many angles. Uh, what is your view on that, and how should a country like India navigate, right? If we're talking, 20, 25 years from, journey, right? Any thoughts around that part? You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think it's extremely unfortunate. I think what's happening globally. I think India is handling it quite maturely. I think the benefit of India retaining a relatively balanced, non-aligned position is very evident at a moment like this. Sometimes, someone who spent a lot of time in the US, was educated there, and so on, one is at times felt one should be leaning as a country closer into alliance with the US. But I think moments like this show you the wisdom of the policymakers over the ages. Look, I think we need to continue to get this balance right. I don't think we should try to in any way rebound very strongly from the US, and we should handle this maturely, show clearly what our red lines are, not given to kind of bullying and so forth. But at the same time, look for constructive solutions. I think the only positive of the current environment is, weird swings in one direction are often accompanied by swings in the opposite direction equally fast. So I think we should, hold firm and reasonable, but be willing to find compromise. Um, you know, on the one hand, of course, we need to have a certain amount of capabilities within India. As a big country, I think it's clear that being entirely reliant on any other country for some aspects of what is needed in the economy is dangerous. But I worry about kind of too, wholeheartedly recommending such policies, which are becoming, of course, more fashionable in response to one country doing this and the other country does the same thing. I don't think that is good for the global economy. I don't think it's good for India's economy. So I think we should do it, but selectively, intelligently. I think we should be putting a lot of efforts on our diplomatic relationship building. I think, we hear, like in several areas, India's capacity building needs to happen. I think this is another area. If you look at total number of diplomats India has serving the country globally compared to its size and compared to other leading powers like China and the US, it makes for pretty woeful reading. So I think we do need to look at that capacity building. We do need to look at maintaining relationships. I don't think we need to go let it be a race to the bottom in terms of everything has to be nationalized, but strategically, intelligently make sure that for our key requirements, whether they be military or otherwise, we have some level of self-sufficiency.
We always talk, right? This accelerated change for India, is an entrepreneurial journey, right? We always have a limitation in resources, but very
Right.
high aspirations, right? And
Exactly.
then you're left with you have to innovate, right? And I think sometimes we innovate so far that we are called a Jugadu nation, and other times we are able to actually do so much more with less, right? And
Right.
I think that's what brings the Indians and the Indianness to the fore. If you see today, large companies globally are being led in technology, Spectra, and IT by Indians who have been able to do exceedingly well. So when we look at India's influence globally, we look at, of course, what our companies are doing, what our diplomats are doing. But when you look at Indians, how do you feel, today? Because, there has been a shift, right, in the way Indians are viewed around the world.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think if you look at, a number of these Fortune 500 CEOs that are Indians, about it seems like 50% of the top 10 companies in the world are led by Indians, which I think, Rajan, brings me to that earlier point. So of course, firstly, it does fill one with pride, but also sort of does, I must at the same time admit, fill me with the recognition that how many of the Satya Nadellas, Sundar Pichais, and so on are being left unfound because we haven't created that set of opportunities. So I think, again, the country is on a wonderful trajectory. I think we all, despite all the problems and our inherent preference to complain about how bad things are sometimes, I think there actually is a transformed country in many ways over the last 20 years. Some of it not for the better, but a lot of it for the better. And I think we just need to now raise our levels of aspiration, not in a blind or foolhardy way, but with as this foundation is seeking to do, with putting some ideas behind it in terms of what are those innovations, what are those ideas, what can we practically hope to achieve over 3 years, 5 years by 2047. But India's, I always say to my team when we're on the real estate side, I say we're, incredibly lucky because we're operating in what is in all likelihood going to be the fastest growing big country over the next 20 years, what is certainly going to be the fastest growing urbanization in the next 20 years, in what is already one of the largest industries and is likely to remain one of the fastest growing industries. So now it's up to us to execute well, because we really don't have any excuses. No one can tell me that there wasn't opportunity in this space. So I think that's just one example. But if you look at almost any industry in India, almost any, not just industry, but any facet of Indian life, there is an opportunity for tremendous growth. And what's been interesting for me to see, despite the obvious challenges we have in India, whether illiteracy, poverty, so on, if you speak to the average Indian today versus, say, an average person in Europe or America, it is quite obvious which place is more optimistic, and it's certainly India. So I think it's an interesting sort of point of human character that the direction of travel seems to matter more in some degrees than the starting point, because we may have many challenges, but the opportunities before us, the excitement of creating a better country for our 100th birthday, 22 years from now, is very palpable. And I think so that gives me a lot of encouragement that we're living in a moment of great opportunity. We've done a lot of the hard yards, whether you look at building the fundamental institutions of a democracy in the early years of independence, or you look at the kind of challenging economic reforms that, as you said, were brought about by emergency-like economic conditions in the 90s. Those were in many ways much more challenging than what we face now. And I think now we have an opportunity to really capitalize on all of that good work that's happened before us. There's no shortage of challenges, no shortage of risks, whether from tweets in the US administration down to capacity building in India and everything in between. But I think for me, it is one of the most optimistic times we could hope to be operating in.
No, absolutely. And I think, that's what gives rise to the opportunities, the excitement, which is so, visible in your voice and everything that you're doing, Pirojsha. And, I just realized that we've come to, our time has run so fast and we can keep talking and chatting. But, when you see, like we started with what you would wake up to in 2047, you're leading a group which is already a legacy group, and you touch the lives of so many people. I still remember a conversation with your dad, and I would love to bring in, because he was the first chair of the India at 75 Foundation, when he was CI president, and had actually build the vision for what India would achieve in 2022. And what you rightly said, we've seen so much progress. But he said a Godrej product touches nearly half of the Indian population, 500-600 million every day, right? And that's the joy. So when you look at your group, in 2047, what do you see, Godrej as? How do you see it different from what it is today?
Well, Rajan, as I was saying earlier, I think the future of the group is very much in our hands. We feel that, as I was saying, that we're in an opportunity space that's almost unlimited. Almost any industry you look at in India, if you project its size today and you project its size in 2047, you're going to get 10x, 100x kind of multiple of scale. So the opportunity is there. So I think it's up to us now to execute extremely well. If I kind of look back at the heritage of the group, what I often say internally, we've done absolutely fabulously, I think, and I'm hugely grateful to, my family members, the lakhs of Godrejites who've come before me, whose great work has built us into this position of strength. But I think a couple of the things I'm proudest of what we've done are the governance, ethics, and trust that we've run the business with, and the credibility that has given us. So today, if we look at any business and if we want to enter a new business, we benefit not just from the fact that India's growth story and India's trajectory is fantastic, but also that we have a extremely strong starting point almost anywhere. We can access capital, customers trust the brand, partners are keen to work with us, bankers have great relationship with us, and so that is an incredible strength and benefit that I'm extremely proud to inherit and from all the good work. If I was, however, putting on a slightly more self-critical lens, I'd say given the power of the brand, which I genuinely think is about as strong as any brand in the country, where are our businesses that are in the top 5 or 10 businesses today in the country? And there aren't those. So I think, and I don't think it's from a lack of opportunity. So our job now is to do the hard work, do our best, and try to build some of those businesses, continue to get this balance that the group has always focused on of doing well while also doing good. So certainly not taking any shortcuts to achieving those kind of outcomes, but can we, on top of building on this reputation for trust and ethics, can we also make sure the Godrej Group is known as the best performing set of businesses in the country would be the aspiration.
There you go. Clear goals, from the mind, clean working hands from governance, but warm, caring heart, to help change, not only every Godrejite, but every Indian. And in that process, extend that brand credibility that you talked of what Godrej has, even to India as a whole. And I think that is what, will help India, achieve its true position in 2047. Such a joy, Pirojsha, to chat with you. And thank you so much for making the time and sharing all of these thoughts. And I'm sure, CI and all these other institutions will continue to use this at the right point when we think something's not going the right way, that this is what was discussed. But look forward to engaging with you in this journey over the next 22 years. Thanks again for a wonderful discussion and chat.
Thanks very much, Rajan. Real pleasure having this chat.
Likewise. Take care. Thanks.